or hit us up in Super Chat in the YouTube chat. We'll be sure to see that. And hit that thumbs up as you walk in the door. Helps us greatly, but you already knew that. See if we can get this to 200 out of the gate. Make our lives a little bit easier as well. Helps us keep doing free content. And, makes everything better. Helps us get the views to more eyeballs, to more people. And, it's good for me is what's good for you. Adam, let's jump right into it. 2 games to touch on. We've got about 55 minutes before we go live at 5:30 p.m. Eastern time. We'll kick it off with the Toronto Raptors and the Boston Celtics. This game opened at 1.5. Toronto laying 1.5 points. That's where it stands. The total opened at 216. It's up to 218.5 right now. The Boston Celtics, just a collective, fantastic team effort in game 1, from Tatum to Kemba to Jaylen Brown to Daniel Tice posting a 13-15 double-double across the board. These guys just put up really solid overall lines, and that's what makes them a really good team. Collectively, they can put up big numbers across the board. Even Marcus Smart posting 21 actual points in that 112-94 win. We'll start with Boston, the quote-unquote road team here. How are we approaching a team like Boston that does such a good job of generating offense and fantasy points from not just one player like we'll get to in Utah, Denver, but from across the entire starting lineup?
Yeah, I mean, one reason I think this series should be really fun from a DFS standpoint is that both of these teams run tight rotations. And as long as nothing goes wrong with fouls or injuries, you know you're going to get a lot of minutes from these Boston guys. So it makes it so that, on one hand, on bigger slates or during the regular season, you kind of had problems with Boston where it was like, all these guys are so good that it's really difficult to pinpoint where production is going to come from. Now on these smaller slates and in the playoffs where you're getting 38 to 40 minutes barring foul trouble or blowouts, it's easier to kind of roster these guys alongside each other. The price tags are really favorable as well. Last game, you lost a few minutes at the end to blowout. But, as expected, you saw a lot of run in the first half for the main Boston guys. And I think that the pricing in general is pretty favorable. Jason Tatum, the most expensive on DraftKings at only 9,200. You assume if this game's competitive and he's not in foul trouble, he's playing 40 minutes. So I think that's a really good price tag. I think Kemba and Jaylen Brown are both underpriced. Jaylen even more favorably priced on FanDuel than he is on DraftKings. I think Boston in general just looks really good here.
Looking at Kemba Walker, $7,600 on DraftKings, pretty interesting price point on him. He seems to be fully healthy. There was a time there where Kemba, particularly early in that Philadelphia series, didn't seem to be himself. He's $7,800 on FanDuel, $76 on DraftKings. Where does he stack up against the rest of the field on a 2-game slate? Ownership currently coming in on Kemba Walker on DraftKings specifically at 29%, which isn't insane. It's kind of middle in the pack compared to anybody above 20. And then on FanDuel, you've got Kemba weighing in at 34%. He's probably like 12th from the top on FanDuel, maybe 15th from the top on DraftKings.
Yeah, I think that seems to be about where it should be for me. Kemba individually, I think grades out pretty well. The salary has come up a bit, but like you said, he's playing better. He's not showing really any signs of rust anymore. The problem that you're going to get to as far as Kemba exposure is that it's just obviously a really, really deep guard slate with Mitchell and Murray from the Utah game. But then even from this game, you have Kyle Lowry and Fred VanVleet at basically the same price point as Kemba Walker. For me, they all project Kemba, Lowry, and VanVleet, that is, project within basically 1 point of each other, and they're separated by $100 a piece. So it really comes down to ownership between them as far as who you prefer. But I think in general, you're kind of just going to spread out your exposure between those guys. If there was one knock on Kemba, it would be that we're not seeing quite as many minutes for him as we are for from Boston for guys like Jaylen Brown or Tatum, and we're not seeing quite as many minutes for Kemba as we are for VanVleet or Lowry on the Toronto side. So a slight knock there, but even factoring that in, like I said, they all project within a point of each other.
Let's talk about the wings a little bit here. Marcus Smart getting a good amount of ownership, $6,000 on DraftKings. He's presumably going to get a decent amount of minutes here. There's no reason Brad Stevens should look to this game as a spot where they won't, especially given that it should be a lot closer than last time. Hell, Toronto's still favored in this game. That should tell you all you need to know. They got smoked by 18 points last time out. They were down by 24 points late in the fourth quarter, and they still come into game 2 as favorites. But Playing time for someone like Marcus Smart, he got 31 minutes. He lost probably 4 minutes towards the end of that game to blowout, which makes sense. Played the entire first quarter, and then about 5 minutes in the second of 17 minutes. I think you could probably project him around, 35 minutes, assuming this game stays competitive or more, because against Philly, he'd been playing a ton. So what are your thoughts on his minutes today? 43 against Philly in game 4, 39 in game 3. So Marcus Smart's minutes have kind of been all over the place, but he clearly has the upside to get more depending on how Brad Stevens views the situation, it appears.
Yeah, I have him in at 38 minutes. You mentioned the playing time he was getting in the previous series. Last game, the playing time was down a little bit, but again, like you said, he lost time to blowouts. But it's also just a series where I think he clearly has a role here. You're talking about a Toronto team that runs several guards. A lot of times they have 3 guards out there at the same time, and there's 2 ball dominant guys in Lowry and Van Vliet for Smart to defend. So I think this is another series where ultimately you see big minutes from Smart. The biggest issue I have with him is just that his salary, I think, is a little bit too close to Jaylen Brown, to Kemba, to Van Vliet, to Lowry. Not that they're at the same price point, but it's not really that difficult, I don't think, to get from Smart to those guys. And we know that they just produce at a higher per minute rate than Smart does on average. So Smart himself grades out, I think, basically being priced correctly. But then I think that the other guards that I mentioned are all somewhat underpriced, so they look a little bit more favorable to me than Smart does.
Yeah, when you look at the usage rate in the postseason, 5 games now for the Celtics team, you've got Gordon Hayward played 34 minutes, so I suppose I can take him off the court, make this a little bit easier for us. The usage is Jason Tatum up top, 27.8%, 6%, no surprise. You got Kemba at 25.8, Jaylen Brown at 24. Daniel Tice has even been at 21% across 94 minutes. And then Marcus Smart's down at 15.2%. So of all of these guys that we've discussed, of all of these players who have contributed quite nicely, to be fair, Marcus Smart is clearly lagging behind everybody in usage. And to what you just pointed out, once you start getting up in that price point, it starts to, it's not going to equal theirs, but come close enough. It's hard to make the argument for someone whose usage is, between 8 and 10 points behind those guys.
Right. He at his price point, he looks like someone to me that if I were playing 150 lineups, I'd be probably around the field, because I don't think he's overpriced. I don't think he's underpriced. I don't think he's someone that I want to be taking a really big stand on one way or the other. In 3 max lineups, I'd be surprised if I'm getting to him, just because he doesn't look that appealing relative to other guys, and he's getting enough ownership where I don't think he'll kind of pop towards the top of my lineups for that reason either.
Yeah, 41%. It's quite a bit of ownership on Marcus Smart right now. 49.8% on FanDuel at 5,700. So before we move on to Toronto, who would you say DraftKings and FanDuel, your top plays from this Boston team are? Jason Tatum's going to cost you the most at 92. And then it comes down quite a bit. You've got pretty much all mid-range guys after that. And then Daniel Tice, I guess we could consider a value option around that 5K range.
Well, I also want to point out Robert Williams at 3,300. Yeah.
I just worried that he wasn't that. Let's jump into this then, and then we can get into it. Fair enough. So Robert Williams, and I'll just kind of set the table for you, played 19 minutes last game. And not all of this, as many people had tried to point out, was the result of a blowout. He did get first quarter minutes and he got first half minutes, but Daniel Tice was also in foul trouble. So just curious how you're viewing something like this when Tice had 2 fouls in the first, and then his 3rd foul in the second. Robert Williams came in for him directly, subbed in for him both of those quarters, right? And then didn't Tice have his 4th in the 3rd? So that's the only reason I didn't bring him up. I'm just not particularly confident that those minutes are going to even be close to where they were, given his lack of playing time against the Philadelphia 76ers. Yeah,
so I think that's obviously the legitimate concern, but the reason that I'm still interested in Williams is that Ennis can't. So he, you said that people were trying to say that it was blowout. He got 0 blowout run for one. He didn't play in the 4th quarter.
Right.
When the game blew out, he
that's people that aren't actually looking at the game flow.
Right. And everything. Right. So that's not a concern at all. The only concern with the playing time is the fouls to Daniel Tice, like you said. But the reason I'm still somewhat optimistic, at least about Williams' minutes, is that Cantor didn't play at all. And you think about the matchup. This isn't one where you would expect that they need Cantor. At the end of the seeding games, if you remember, you kind of saw Robert Williams starting to get priority over Enes Kanter, and then it kind of disappeared in the Philly series. But in the Philly series, you had Joel Embiid, who is one of the most frequent post-up players in the league. He's a dominant post presence, and Enes Kanter is a strong or relatively strong post defender. So it made sense there. You don't have that on this Toronto team where you would need Cantor out there for those reasons. So I think that it makes sense that they prioritize Williams in this matchup. And so if you assume that in a competitive game, 48 minutes or about 48 minutes are going to Daniel Theis and Robert Williams, Daniel Theis hasn't been getting more than like 30 minutes in a game, even going back to the Philly series. I have him in for 30 minutes here, but that still leaves 18 for Robert Williams. Even if you say Daniel Theis gets like 32 minutes and Williams gets 16, Williams has averaged a fantasy point per minute when he's played with Kemba on the floor this year to try and, give him minutes with starters. And overall, he's well over a fantasy point per minute player. So at his salary, even if he gets like 16 minutes, I think he's going to project pretty well. And when you consider that Theis has had trouble playing more than 30 minutes, really, for one reason or another, I think 17, 18 minutes for Williams is very realistic.
Okay. Do you think, would you operate under the assumption at all that if Ibaka's out there for a long time, that Brad Stevens might forego Robert Williams and just go with a smaller lineup as we've seen him do in the past? Or is that not a problem of yours?
I'm not too worried about it. I mean, we saw Ibaka play 26 minutes last game. Williams obviously got his normal run. Like they didn't go with any small lineups last game. Actually, Toronto was playing their giant lineup with Ibaka and Gasol alongside each other for a bit. So it's certainly a possibility, but I also just don't really know that they would prefer getting so what happens there? Grant Williams gets more minutes at the expense of Robert Williams. That would
probably, that's it. I can't imagine Semi Ojeleye is going to get a ton of run at the 5. So yeah.
I thought the rotation was just really interesting as far as Williams getting the run and Brad Wanamaker playing huge minutes. Wanamaker did benefit from the blowout. He played about 5 extra minutes, but he was still looking like he was going to play 23, 24 minutes. They really shortened the bench rotation there, and it seemed like Wanamaker and Williams were the two primary beneficiaries.
So with that in mind, how much Robert Williams do you see yourself getting?
I haven't crunched lineups yet, so I don't have an actual number, but I do think that he looks like one of the better values as far as the cheap guys go. The thing that potentially keeps the ownership or the exposure in check for me is that, unlike yesterday, you don't have a Giannis to pay up for. You don't have James Harden. The expensive guys are more in that, 9 to 10K range than the 11 to 12K.
What about on the other side of this one where Toronto just really struggled last game? Fred VanVleet with 3 for 16 shooting game, 2 for 11 from 3-point range. It was rough. Now he salvaged because he had 6 steals and 8 assists. You'll take that all day long. It's just not going to happen that often. Kyle Lowry, another one, had a decent enough game shooting, but across 35 minutes, he lost probably 5 minutes to a blowout. In a close game, Nick Nurse is going to give Kyle Lowry an excessive amount of run. He always does. And he's going to run a super short bench. It's tough to know which one of these guys from Lowry or VanVleet is going to put the work in. And Pascal Siakam has been pretty disappointing throughout this restart, including the seeding games, but especially the playoffs. The one thing we do know, though, Adam, is when you look at Nick Nurse's rotations, you're getting 8 players. If you exclude the blowout, you're getting VanVleet, Lowry, Siakam, OG Anunoby, Marc Gasol, and then off the bench, it's going to be Serge Ibaka, Norman Powell, and Terrence Davis. And Davis likely only plays in the first half. So we know what we're getting from a playing time perspective in a close game. And that is something I like to see. Now, once we get to the Nuggets Jazz game, we're going to start talking about players that are in really good spots that we really like. And I think you can say the same for this game as well. But there's definitely a more balanced approach on both of these teams than you see in the next one. It is nice, though, that Nick Nurse is going to, you're getting 40 minutes from most of your starters today if it's competitive.
Yeah, no question. And I think that Toronto just kind of ends up being pretty similar to Boston, the way I view them, because like you said, and like I said at the top, both of these teams run really tight rotations. And so you're expecting, 40 plus minutes from Van Vliet in a competitive game. Lowry's minutes have been a little bit less than Van Vliet's, but you're still expecting, upper 30s, if not 40 minutes from Lowry. And then Siakam should get around 37 minutes as well. He struggled, like you said, but I'm still willing to look at the long-term body of work from Siakam and know that he contributes across the board. So I don't think that the Toronto guys grade out quite as well for me as the Boston guys do. Like I'd rather pay $9,200 for Tatum than $8K for Siakam. I like Kemba a little bit more than Lowry and Van Vliet, but again, they're basically within a point of each other. Jaylen Brown, I think, looks a little bit better as well. But I do like the Toronto, that threesome of Toronto guys as well. Van Vliet, it is worth pointing out too, has taken on a little bit more of a scoring role in the bubble and specifically in the playoffs. You've seen Kyle Lowry's usage rate come down and Van Vliet's go up in the playoffs. So that's something that I am factoring in a bit, that Van Vliet just appears to be, a bit more dominant right now.
I mentioned this with Sal Vetri in the strategy show today. In the postseason, Van Vliet's averaging 13 drives per game to Kyle Lowry's 7. So he has been more aggressive with the basketball in his hands as well.
Yeah, that's something that we've seen in the past too. Anyone who rosters Kyle Lowry a lot is very well aware of the problem that sometimes you turn on the Toronto game and it's just Lowry standing in the corner and Fred VanVleet just pounding the ball. You've seen so VanVleet kind of taking on a more dominant role is something you've seen at times in the past, and so it's something I am buying into. Under the current situation that VanVleet he's playing really well and he's looking to just kind of take over games.
What about Serge Ibaka? I know the price point is getting up there, but I think it makes sense to kind of talk about him a little bit here for a couple reasons. Number one, his ownership on a 2-gamer is very low. And number two, we've seen Nick Nurse on more occasions than one, on more than even a few occasions, give him the opportunity he needs if he's out there crushing. And we've seen 26 minutes from him in 3 of 5 postseason games. It's tough because at that price you'd like to see a little bit more at 6,200, but he has shown legitimate ability to put up ceiling games, Adam, from 43 DraftKings points, the last game in the bubble before the postseason, 25 minutes, then 38, then 43 against Brooklyn, 56 against Brooklyn. He is a very talented offensive player. He is going to operate with pretty heavy usage, higher than most players on his team. As a matter of fact, I think outside of Siakam, Ibaka has the highest usage in the postseason. So he does at 23.5% with a pretty impressive rebounding rate as well, which is coming in at 20.4, leads the team by a really wide margin. Can we make any argument for him here at very low ownership in large field tournaments where you need to be different?
So I'm kind of torn on Ibaka, and I lean towards not really being that interested because I agree with what you say about the ceiling and at low ownership on a 2-game slate. That's pretty much as much of an argument as you need to justify rostering him. But my concerns with Ibaka are that, for one, his price point is relatively high, like you said, and two, thinking back to going into the Brooklyn series, I had pointed out that in the postseason last year, Marc Gasol got a ton of run, like a lot more than he'd gotten during the regular season. And I was talking about it with Josh, and Josh's counter was that they probably just weren't going to need Gasol against Brooklyn, so he didn't think that it was like that continued. And that's what you ended up seeing, was Gasol typically playing 21, 22 minutes, and then Ibaka getting a bunch of minutes behind him. In the first game of this series, you got about 26 minutes from Marc Gasol, and he was on the floor in the fourth quarter when they pulled their starters. So, if that game stays close, it looks like we were on track for 30 minutes from Gasol compared to 26 from Ibaka. So I'm a little concerned that maybe in what should be a more competitive series, you do see Nick Nurse start to prioritize Gasol again. I don't know that I necessarily agree with that, but that's what happened in the playoffs last year, and it's where it was trending, at least in game 1 of this series. So that's a little bit of a concern for me with Ibaka. It's offset somewhat by the fact that he did play alongside Gasol. It was relatively effective. So I have them both in for 26 minutes right now, but it wouldn't be surprising to me if you ended up seeing Gasol end up with more minutes than Ibaka, which does scare me a little bit.
All right, and how about OG Anunoby here? You're looking at pretty considerable ownership on him right now, around 35% on DraftKings, $4,800. Once again, just to repeat this, Nick Nurse will at least give you the assurance that the minutes should be there. Anunoby probably gets like 36 or so in this. Is he a solid option at that ownership for you?
I hope I don't have to get there, just because the upside for him isn't really that high, but it's an okay point per dollar option. Like you're obviously somewhat limited as far as value on the slate goes. Yeah, and last thing, Kyle Lowry, I didn't mention this, but we dug into it a little bit. I didn't mention his ownership. Lowry right now, 53% on FanDuel, 35.8 on DraftKings. That makes sense, but 53% on FanDuel, projected ownership, of course, below only Jaylen Brown, who's coming in at 67%. Is Kyle Lowry here? Oh, you know what? He dropped a little bit, 51. We just got an update 16 seconds ago. If you're a member, you can check that out. We just updated ownership. Is Kyle Lowry's at 7,500? Is that a justifiable spot for you here? Yeah, I think so. It's, kind of like I mentioned with Kemba on DraftKings, but the problem is just that there's so many similar guards and that you're going to want to be allocating at least some exposure to the expensive guys in like Jamal Murray and Mitchell too. So I'm not a spot where I think I'll be taking like a huge stand on Lowry, but I do think he's a good play. Top options from both sides of this game before we hit over to Utah, Denver. Kemba, Tatum. Do you have Tatum's projected ownership in front of you? Jason Tatum on DraftKings or FanDuel? DraftKings. Jason Tatum on FanDuel is the sixth highest, 37%. What about on DraftKings? Oh, I'm sorry. That was my fault. That was DraftKings. DraftKings, okay. Sixth highest, 37%, 53% on FanDuel, third highest, below only Jaylen Brown and Donovan Mitchell. Okay, I was just curious because he was like 11% owned last game and then disappointed, so I thought it might be a little bit lower. But yeah, I like Tatum a lot. Jaylen Brown, I think, looks like a priority as well. Those are probably the guys, and Kemba, I think, are the three I'll get to the most from that game. But again, I like the main Toronto guys as well. All right, one down, one to go. Pop that smash that thumbs up, as they say. Helps us greatly. Hey, want to introduce you to our new sponsor. If you haven't heard of them, well, that's what I'm here for. It's called No House Advantage. Taking a different spin on daily fantasy sports, because here's what they do. They offer player prop contests across all sports, NBA, MLB, NFL, PGA, for cash prizes. Obviously, we wouldn't be talking about it here on the show otherwise. It's exclusively peer-to-peer fantasy sports platform, right? So it levels the field and makes it easier for you to win real cash compared to your traditional DFS sites. It's not like other sites you've seen with prop bets where you're playing against the house. It's strictly peer-to-peer stuff, which makes it a lot better, a lot more enticing, and a lot more enjoyable to play and to win money. You can join for free today. That's the best part. Join for free. All you got to do is download the No House Advantage app. No space house space advantage. And check out the daily prop contests without having to deposit a dime. Got guaranteed cash prize pools. Or you can create your own private contests with friends, which is also a ton of fun. Either way, No House Advantage offers real cash prizes every single day, just like on DraftKings, just like on FanDuel. You choose the contest you want to join, you select your player props. It's that simple. If you're most confident that, say, Jamal Murray is going to score over 30 points, then put that in your 5-point spot and create your lineup all the way down. You can check this out for yourself if it's hard for you to understand. Again, No House Advantage. Download the app. Download it. They'll match your first deposit with up to $20 in free play when you use the promo code Awesemo. It's AWESEMO, but you already knew that. Refer a friend and get $5 more after their first deposit. Beat your friends, not the house. Win big with player props today. So use that promo code Awesemo. Get up to $20 match deposit on by using Awesemo at No House Advantage. Download the app, check it out. Let us know what you think. All right, Adam, Utah, Denver. Another game, should be close, should be fun. 1 point spread here. By the way, Denver was laying 1.5 points today. Now they're getting a point. So the line has moved a little bit on this one, which is kind of interesting. 217.5 total. This series has gone back and forth. Like, this has been a pendulum series for sure. I mean, just look at it. In game one, Utah gets to overtime, ends up losing by 10. Then they win. They blow out the Nuggets. And they really blow out the Nuggets by 37 points. Then they win again by 2 points. They lose by 10. They lose by 12. Here we are, game 7. It's going to be a really fun one. Everybody should stay up to watch this in its entirety, including you, Josh Engelman.
What are we doing with the Utah Jazz starting with Donovan Mitchell?
Yeah, I mean, it should be a great game. You've seen, obviously, so you've seen these teams play 6 times now. Somewhat different iteration of Utah now that Conley's back, but you have, I think it's been 4 games with Conley, so you know what to expect here. And Denver really hasn't had much of an answer for Donovan Mitchell. You've seen several games where it just turns into Donovan Mitchell and Jamal Murray taking turns, just trading baskets, especially in the fourth quarter. So it's been really fun. I think that, there's no real reason to expect that not to be the case here, especially from the Utah side, because, obviously you have Conley, you have Clarkson, but those guys aren't taking the ball from Donovan Mitchell. You could, when we talk about Denver, you'll at least be able to make the argument that potentially some other guys, namely Jokic, could, kind of step up if Jamal Murray's not shooting the lights out again. But with Utah, it's going to go through Donovan Mitchell basically no matter what. And so I think that while his price tag has come up, it's still a pretty favorable salary just because you're expecting 40 plus minutes probably in a game 7 from Mitchell. He has about a 38% usage rate in the series. And even if you go back, if you kind of combine his series usage rate and then just his overall usage rate, playing without Bojan Bogdanovic and with Conley and Clarkson, it still averages out to over a 36% usage rate for him. So Denver really has had no answer for him. Gary Harris being back makes it a little bit, should make it a little bit easier for Denver to defend him, but it's also not like Harris didn't just miss 2 months and Harris wasn't playing great even before he got hurt. So I'm not really downgrading Mitchell for that. So I think that, as far as payoff options go, Mitchell still looks really good.
38% usage in the postseason. Monster per minute production, 1.57. Yeah, he's been great. It was surprising to me earlier in the day that ownership on Mitchell was pretty low. Even at 31% on DraftKings, that actually seemed lower to me than I would have anticipated. And I guess one of the reasons is people aren't enticed by paying $9,900 for him. But on this slate, raw points are going to be important, right? And I know he's expensive, but how many other players do we have that can go out there and rip off 70 fantasy points? Like, serious question. I know maybe Siakam could do that. Can Jason Tatum do it? It's possible, but it's also really important to point out, Adam, that despite this series being played at the slowest pace of any series in the postseason, 93.5 possessions per 48, very slow. Despite that, you've still seen both teams attempting an insane amount of shots. If you watch the strategy show, I talked about this. 46% of Utah's shots have been 3-pointers. 43% of Denver's have been 3-pointers. That's up from 34% in the regular season. They're really crazy numbers. Denver's not scoring in the paint at all. They're down 13 points from the regular season because Rudy Gobert and company are preventing that, but they just keep gunning. And it's not even that either team's scoring in transition. They're playing at a slow pace. They're just taking so many 3-pointers. And Donovan Mitchell, case in point, just look at the numbers. He's gone insane in that respect. So, just looking at Mitchell, he's one of the very few players on this slate that can go out there and rip off a true 50-point game with some peripherals to go along with it. So I really, to kind of expand on what you said, I don't think that price point's all that nuts. If this was a 6-game slate and we had Giannis and we had Luka and we had Kawhi, we'd be having a different conversation, but that's not what we're dealing with.
Yeah. And I think it's kind of just, as far as the ownership goes, it's just really interesting because, well, for one, Mitchell's ownership has just been low in general. Like even last slate, I think if I remember correctly, Jamal Murray was like 40% and Mitchell was like 7%. So it kind of has seemed like it's been tough for people to get to this price point. And I think one potential reason for that is, we always talk about recency bias and not wanting to kind of give into it. And so if you're looking at rates for like the entire season, it's just going to be really difficult to roster Donovan Mitchell at basically the same price point as like Nikola Jokic, for example. But I think that you can, to some extent, put more weight on recent games when you're talking about a postseason series where you're just playing the same teams over and over again. And you don't want to look at it and say like, oh, Jamal Murray is now a 60% 3-point shooter. But you can look at it and really factor in how much these two are shooting. Mitchell, we both mentioned it's a 38% usage rate. Like Mitchell's bringing the ball up the court, and then it's up to him whether or not anyone else gets it, and they're not going to get it. So I do think you can kind of buy into Donovan Mitchell looking to take over these games and having every opportunity. And for that reason, he should be as expensive as he is now.
What about the rest of this team outside of Donovan Mitchell? Jordan Clarkson was a darling early on in the postseason, getting a super cheap price point. I remember you DMing me saying like, how is he this cheap in this opening game? It was 4,500 in game one, and now he's up to 54, which really isn't that crazy, despite Donovan Mitchell shouldering a huge workload. Clarkson's been consistent in as far as production goes, but that's not saying a whole lot. Royce O'Neal's projected to get a ton of ownership strictly because of minutes. Outside of that, he is an empty vessel, Adam. 38 minutes of virtually nothing, but here we are. There is some ownership coming in on a few of these Utah Jazz players. It's just not really encouraging.
Yeah, it's nothing outside of not O'Neal. Outside of Mitchell, there's nothing that I feel great about from Utah, but I do think that it's pretty obvious, why they'd still be getting some ownership. Like Rudy Gobert is averaging just shy of 40 minutes per game in this series. He's going to just match Jokic, if not play more. So the minutes are there for him. His numbers have been fine. The salary is pretty affordable. Clarkson obviously takes a hit now that Conley's back, but still should play 29, 30 minutes here. And like you said, the salary is still affordable. The one thing kind of missing from this slate is quality, like high upside value guys. Like the players in that 4,500 to 5K range that you're using value are the guys like Royce O'Neal, like OG Anunoby. Obviously, they can pay off that salary because they play so many minutes, but they don't give you that same ceiling that someone like Jordan Clarkson does for a little bit more, because there's at least some version of this game, if you played it 1,000 times, where Denver somehow defends Mitchell differently. I don't really know how they would do that, but find something to get the ball out of his hands and Jordan Clarkson takes over. There's zero versions where Royce O'Neal takes over, for example. So from a tournament standpoint, the upside at that place for Clarkson is somewhat appealing, but I'm just not sure how much you'll really need to get there because there's so many other good guard options that are still reasonably priced.
Do you remember the guy that was Royce O'Neal in our YouTube chat that just kept spamming it for like a week straight and coming back with
I had totally forgotten, but I remember now.
You know what I'm talking about? Yeah. Coming back with different, I forget what he was saying. There was something that he was, God, what was it? Josh will probably remember. He was saying something each time that, I don't know, riled everyone up. I wish I could remember, but I can't. I just
wasn't Royce O'Neal's name spelled wrong?
That was but he spelled it wrong. When I told him he spelled it wrong, he spelled it wrong again to try and correct it, and then spelled it wrong for a third time. So my guess is that wasn't the real Royce O'Neal. Do you have any other interest outside or any other interest in Utah that we haven't touched on? I guess if you want to spend a second or a little bit more on Gobert, go for it. If not, I'm fine to go to the Denver side.
Yeah, so I guess the only thing to add is just that you mentioned O'Neal and you know what you're getting out of him. The kind of nice thing about him is he does contribute right around 10% assist and rebounding percentages, which is nice, but he also contributes about a 10% usage percentage. It's the same thing as always. He's playing huge minutes. He'll get ownership for that reason though, and the volatility just as far as the ceiling goes isn't really there. So if he fits into a lineup and you need him, then go for it. But it's definitely not like a target that I'm happy about.
Okay. Yeah, David, I think you're right, actually. I do remember something like that. God, I wish somebody should know. We got such a good group at chat. Usually one of them always could tell me what was going on because my memory's shot. And yeah, Josh, you're right. I never should have expected you would remember that either. Denver, let's start with Jamal Murray. Number one, how hard do you think it'll be or how easy do you think it'll be to get Jamal Murray and Donovan Mitchell into the same lineup today on DraftKings, 9,900 and 9,700 respectively? Or opposite way, but you get
as far as like using an optimizer, it probably won't do it all that often because it's going to spit out some of the, so many of those, it's going to go to that like 7 to 8K guard range, a decent amount. But as far as, if you're looking to do that, I don't think it'll be that difficult because they're not that expensive. And it's not like you're trying to get them with a Giannis or something. Like you just go to Mitchell Murray and then you go down to like the 5 to 6K range. It won't be that tough.
All right. So Jamal Murray, been pretty stupendous. His last 3 games, 35.5% usage, 30% assist rate, 12.7% rebound rate, 1.7 fantasy points per minute. His potential assists are way up too. And I think it correlates with Nikola Jokic being down a little bit. His assist totals haven't been as impressive as you're used to seeing out of the facility or the playmaking big man. Last game was solid with 9, but he's had a few games where he's been pretty quiet. Jamal Murray's averaging 13 potential assists in the postseason. So it's not even just a scoring at him. It's the fact that he's been more involved as a facilitator. His touches are gone from 75 in the regular season to 91 in the postseason. He's pretty much doing everything, contributing across the board. And Michael Malone's going to play him for an easy 40 plus minutes tonight, assuming this game doesn't blow. Hell, even if this game did blow out, it's a game 7. I'm sure he just plays it all the way through.
Right. I love Murray here. And so I just quickly crunched my first set of lineups. And from an optimizer standpoint, really just not getting to both of Mitchell and Murray. I'm getting to more Murray than Mitchell, but not in the same lineups. And so I think in tournaments, it does still mean that you're going to be contrarian if you pair them together. And obviously they correlate well. So that is a strategy that I like, going back to your previous point. But, huge minutes from Murray. Obviously, shooting the lights out, which you can't really count on, but more involved as a playmaker, you said, getting a ton of good looks. Utah just hasn't really shown the ability to defend him, and I don't really see any reason that changes at this point. Like, if they could change it, they already would have.
All right. Well, then let's talk about players outside of Jamal Murray, because I really like him today. I don't really see how you don't like Jamal Murray. It certainly does appear that you're probably going to get contrarian in the event that you try and be a little bit different, jam both of them into your lineups. What about Nikola Jokic?
I think that I just prefer Murray based on how the games have gone. Like, Jokic's potential rebounds and assists have been down. His expected rebound percentage and assist percentage, which is based on potential numbers, is down from where his averages are. So that concerns me even more so than the fact that Murray's usage rate is up over 30%. It's that Jokic is just losing so much in pretty much all categories. So he still projects well for me. And if his ownership is down, then he projects well enough where he would start to pop into some lineups. But I think that I do prefer going to Murray between the two. It also helps that you have some value at center, whether you're going to Gasol or Robert Williams. I think makes it a little bit tougher to get to Jokic, because if you go to Jokic, it means that you're being forced to pay down, at the guard positions or at forward, where the value is pretty questionable and where there's guys that you want to pay up for.
Jeremy Grant's coming in at a pretty reasonable price point here. Before I get to that, though, I did want to mention, you said that you're probably not going to see a ton. I think you will see I think you're going to see a lot of hand-built lineups go Jamal Murray, Donovan Mitchell. Like, I think a lot of them, right? But how much of the field does that make up? I don't know. Murray's getting around 35% ownership on DraftKings. On FanDuel, he's coming in at like 44%. So he's going to be up there, him and Mitchell both. Also, DraftKings, FanDuel, entirely different story. Mitchell's only 8,500 on FanDuel, which is pretty absurd. Jeremy Grant, though. We'll talk about Grant, Millsap, and Michael Porter Jr. I want to hit on everything. Again, 2-game slate, no stone unturned. But Jeremy Grant is pretty reasonably priced. Michael Malone's had no problem giving him considerable run throughout the postseason. Last game, 35 minutes, 40 before that, 36 prior to that. So 3 straight 35-plus minute games for Jeremy Grant. He's not a particularly skilled player in terms of fantasy production. Rebounds at a less than stellar clip. Doesn't score at a great clip either, but he's going to be out there for a lot of minutes. And sometimes when you're looking at discounted price points, minutes are key. And you're seeing that with the ownership coming in on Royce O'Neal so high. How about Jeremy Grant? And how does he stack up against Millsap, whose minutes outside of one game have been completely depressed?
Yeah, I like Grant. I like Grant, at least relative to the other guys you talked about. Like, they project pretty similarly for me. Grant, O'Neal, and OG Anunoby, they all should play big minutes, but Grant is a little bit higher usage guy. He still contributes rebounds, and he can pick up some defensive stats as well. So at similar price points, I do think Grant looks a little bit better than those guys. I expect him to get the minutes again. He just serves more of a role defensively here, and you've seen Mike Malone for a while, just prioritizing him over Millsap. So I feel pretty good about Grant's minutes, even with Gary Harris back. We saw it last game, and I expect it to continue, that Torrey Craig's the one that really takes the haircut on playing time, not Jeremy Grant. So I think that Grant is a pretty useful value option because I think he's just got a little bit higher ceiling than Anunoby and Royce O'Neal.
We had a question in our premium Slack chat. Let me get to this. Hit on it 1 second here. Pulling it up because it disappeared on me. Come on now. It was about Daniel Tice. I think it was, are you going to be limiting Daniel Tice to, are you setting max one? Scoops Cote says, are you setting max one of Tice Williams and Gasol Ibaka on DraftKings?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I would think so. Do you have, let me actually go back to this for a second. Do you have interest in Daniel Tice? Because while you're going to be setting one, obviously, especially on a 2-game slate where you're going to probably get a little bit of everyone, even if you're not huge on him. Are you buying into Tice here at 5,200?
I think he's pretty much priced where he should be. So it really just comes down to, if he fits in the lineups as like the last guy in, I think it's fine. Like I said, I do think that the game plan, at least if he can stay out of foul trouble and all minutes. That, is 30 to 32 minutes. So I think that's at least there for him.
I was listening. Don't worry. So Michael Porter Jr. We had there was a debate between Sal and myself. Well, I believe we were on the same page here, but between YouTube chat today, the super chat, just about Michael Porter Jr., whether defensively he is a liability, whether he isn't, and the fact that he closed the last couple of games out is encouraging. No doubt about that. I do think one of the points that I brought up is it was easier for him to close that game out because there was no point in those games where Denver really needed to stop the bleeding. And I think what we've seen Michael Malone do in instances, and this is not to say that I'm against rostering Porter. I think there's still some upside here, especially on a small slate, but and depending on the ownership, obviously. But one of the things you've seen is when they were trying to stop the bleeding and they just became a sieve defensively, 130 plus defensive rating, Michael Porter was the first guy to go. That wasn't as much of an issue in the last 2 games because Jamal Murray was knocking down every shot he took. He didn't find the shot he didn't like. And I do think it masked some of the inefficiencies on the defense of the Denver Nuggets, although they have been a little bit better over their previous 3 games.
Yeah, I think that it's not like it's clearly not a foregone conclusion that Porter doesn't close. The problem that you just run into is his floor is very low because we've seen a couple of games where Utah just goes at Michael Porter and Malone really has no choice but to get him off the floor. You combine that with the fact that in a playoff series, he's just not going to be as high a usage guy because Jamal Murray is looking for his shot. Nikola Jokic is going to get his. So you're still talking about him being the third option offensively. And then you also have the risk of him getting played off the floor, which is a legitimate risk. We've already seen it happen, and it makes sense because he can't defend. So that's all the risk. Like, yeah, for his, he's still relatively cheap. You still can get 28 minutes from him and he can still get hot and pay off his salary, no question. But, there is really legitimate downside there.
Yeah, there really is. How many minutes did you say you're giving Millsap?
Millsap, I have a 22.
22?
Porter at 28.
Okay. Porter 28 and Grant at?
36.
36. All right. What about Gary Harris?
I have him at 24 minutes. I'm not going to get to him.
Yeah, it's going to be tough too. He is very cheap, but I mean, how much? God, there's going to be one of those games where Gary Harris just goes off. Maybe it's today. 3,900. Played 21 minutes last game, I think. Right?
20.8.
Is he getting any ownership at all? Not really. Single-digit ownership on Gary Harris. I guess there's a reason for that, right? But
it's Gary Harris for 20-something minutes.
Torrey Craig, 3,600. He's getting like 6.7% ownership. Well, let's round out the Denver Nuggets then. Is there anything else you see here that appeals to you outside of the guys we've mentioned?
No, I think we touched on it all. Wow, I just looked at DK ownership for the first time, and Royce O'Neal being the highest owned guy on the slate is something.
Yep. Like, honestly, Gary Harris could play. Gary Harris is what, 3,900, and how much is Royce O'Neal? I forget. Royce O'Neal is what's that?
I think 46.
Yeah, he's 45. He's gonna be out there for a lot more minutes. He just probably won't do a damn thing. I don't know. That ownership is insane. Like 50% ownership. I guess minutes are king, even if you're not doing anything.
Yeah, but that's the weird thing is, they are, and I understand why, medium projection wise, it looks good, but you still have Anunoby, you still have Jeremy Grant at that price point. So I still don't get why O'Neal would be getting that much ownership.
Well, it's funny because when I see that, my assumption is immediately, oh, okay, that means Mitchell and Murray must both be super high because I know, roster 2 of the 9K plus guys, and then you're forced into getting the O'Neals and like the other OG Anunobys and such, but that isn't necessarily the case. Now, I guess it does make sense given that Jason Tatum is up there and Jamal Murray and Mitchell are both very high on FanDuel, but on DraftKings, Murray 35%, Donovan Mitchell 31%. They're getting ownership, but not what I would have expected. Nikola Jokic is up there, Tatum. So I guess all the high-priced guys are kind of grouped in, but it's a little less extreme than I thought it would be. Do you see yourself coming in above or below the field on Jokic? Right now, the only player with higher projected ownership is Royce O'Neal.
I think I'll come in under because he's just higher owned than Mitchell and Murray, and I prefer those two.
Okay. Anything else for this game?
Nope.
All right. Top options from both sides.
Mitchell and Murray, and then Jokic.
Yeah, okay.
I like Grant for value.
We're giving away some free stuff today, so listen up, friends. We've got a bit of a good one. You get a free month of Awesemo Plus NBA by predicting whether Jamal Murray or Donovan Mitchell is going to score more points in Game 7. All you got to do is check out the pinned tweet at Awesemo_com on Twitter. Details there, how to enter at Awesemo_com. All right. Hey, while you're at it, if you don't have a Twitter account yet, if you don't use it for baseball or basketball and really any sport, it's super helpful. Even if you don't want to tweet, it's great to get information. Follow Adam and myself while you're at it at ShipMyMoneyDFS, at Laffy_D, LOUGHY_D, right under our heads. You won't regret it. It's a good time. We like to talk, sometimes talk shit, mostly on Adam's part, but it's enjoyable.
Only sometimes.
Yeah, always on Adam's part, but you'll enjoy it. I promise you that much. Garth, again, man, appreciate you. That's Garth's second $50 super chat of the day. So you're the man. He says, my guys, quick question for Adam. How would you go about handling your exposure on a 2-game slate? Laffy, no offense, but you spoke on it this morning. Thanks, guys. So he's trying to cover all his bases. Much respect.
So
how are you how do you go about exposures on a 2-game slate?
The same way as I do on normal slates. It just comes down to, again, it's basically playing the best lineups that I can as far as projection goes that are also relatively low owned. Typically, you're just going to get obviously more of certain guys. Like on 8-game slates, I'm not going to be really that comfortable having tons of a couple of different players. Whereas on a 2-game slate, I'm a lot more comfortable kind of just taking a stand where if I think someone's lower owned, I'll go, way over the field on them.
Okay.
Lower owned than they should be, I should say.
Yeah, thanks again, Garth. We appreciate you. Guys, if you haven't gone to Awesemo.com yet, there's no better time to do it than now. You still have NBA content happening. Baseball, we've got all of our projections and ownership made, created, and used by the best DFS player out there, Alex Baker, Awesemo himself. You've got MMA, PGA still going on, some major tournaments, and of course, NFL right around the corner. The first game, Thursday Night Football on the 10th of September. We're officially in September. Less than 2 weeks till week 1, till legitimate Sunday week 1. And we've got some awesome NFL content. If you're doing best ball on DraftKings where they have the Millie Maker, or really anywhere else, you're playing your season-long leagues with friends and you want to embarrass them, we've got the best season-long package we've ever put together. It's brand new. It's got everything from rankings to projections to awesome tools that are all brand new, not just to Awesemo, but you haven't seen these in the industry yet. And it's only $29.95. It's actually minus $6 because you get $35 in credits to FFPC where they have best ball drafts with tons of big cash prizes. You get $35 there. So you're getting basically it's $29.95. So we're paying you, well, FFPC in a sense is paying you $5.05 to grab the best ball package. But with the monster content, Adam, I know you've been doing best ball drafts literally all day long, and using our content in the process as well. It's awesome stuff. But we've got NFL daily fantasy, of course, as well. Alex's ownership projections, all of our premium stuff, articles, lineup builder, you name it. We've got weekly, we've got monthly, we've got annual subscriptions, we've got the Express Weekly, you name it. It's the preeminent place, preeminent content in daily fantasy sports. And yes, we've broken into the seasonal game as well, which is awesome because DraftKings and FFPC have some huge contests this season. Whether fans are there or not, the money's going to be there, and that's all that matters. Go to awesemo.com/join. And when you do, scroll to the bottom. You've heard me say this before. Scroll to the bottom. Check out the tutorial videos if you haven't done so yet, so you know exactly what you're getting. All of our most popular tools, you'll know how to use them. You know what they do before you decide to dive in. Awesemo.com/join and head into that premium Slack chat when you sign up. You got people, ladies, gentlemen, everybody talking DFS and football and sports betting, you name it, all day and night in our premium Slack. Awesemo.com/join. We'll see you over there. All right, Adam, 5 minutes to bang out some questions. Let's do it. What do you guys got? Hit us. Thomas asked, I have Kemba, Smart, Van Vliet, Lowry all in one lineup. Being that contrarian, do you think there's upside to that strategy? Having Kemba, Smart, Van Vliet, and Lowry in the same lineup. It's actually not a bad question, Adam, because Van Vliet and Lowry and Kemba and Smart. So both backcourt members from each team playing against each other. What do you say?
Yeah, I think it's perfectly fine because it correlates. Like, I'm not normally a big proponent of game stacking on, in basketball, but on 2-game slates like this, I think it makes a lot of sense. So that worked out.
Yep. Fading Tatum and Jaylen Brown single entry. Yeah, I mean, look, you can pretty much, and this if you're doing a single entry, fading Tatum or Jaylen Brown, I have no issues with that at all. If that means you're getting Mitchell and Murray into the same lineup or Jokic, yeah, you can make that work. Kemba or Lowry, Adam, from Steve L?
I have Kemba a little bit higher.
Okay. Spencer says, Henry, lay off the drugs. Oh, with that comment, I would absolutely agree. Kemba, Royce O'Neal, or Conley, Anunoby, and Powell. I think I go with number one there. Yeah, I'll go with one. What's up?
I didn't hear what they were.
I'll ask you the next one. Tice or Grant?
Tice.
All right. If we have anything from our premium Slack chat, happy to hit on that as well. How much do you like Norman Powell today? Because that could answer the question from before.
Not really.
Okay. Yeah. 4,900. I think he's fine. I'd say it's a pretty close one. Who asked that question? Behemoth. I'd say it's pretty close. I'll ask you then again. Kemba, Anunoby, and O'Neal, or Conley, Anunoby, and Powell?
So Kemba, O'Neal, or Conley and Powell?
Correct. Yeah.
Kemba, O'Neal.
All right. That's who I had as well. What point guard would you use? Murray, Lowry, or Conley? Which two, he says.
I'd preferably use Murray and Lowry.
Yeah, the guys that are projected for the most fantasy points. Robert Williams or Gasol on FanDuel tournament?
I don't have the pricing in front of me, but I assume they're not the same price point. So Gasol, unless it gets me something really good.
All right. Jingles or Jeremy Grant on FanDuel?
Grant.
Porter or Tice? There's a good one for you, Adam. Porter or Tice?
Tice.
All right. No, Jeremiah. No. Williams and Tice in the same lineup in single entry? No. Kemba or Van Vliet? I like both of them a lot today, but I think I would lean Kemba.
Same.
What else do we have here? Couple minutes. Morris or Harris?
Neither.
That's fun. Yeah, my God.
I guess Morris.
What's that?
Yes, Morris.
I guess, yeah. I don't know. I'd say you're pretty much flipping a coin there. I'd go with the cheaper guy, honestly. I have Mitchell, Conley, Tatum, Smart, and Lowry. Is that okay? Mitchell, Conley, Tatum, Smart. Yeah, that's fine. I don't see why not. OG or Grant, Anunoby or Grant.
I like Grant a little bit more.
Okay. Smart or Clarkson. I'm going Smart there. What else we got coming in? Who wins outright? Boston and Denver. I think Toronto, Frank. I'm going Toronto here. I think they get this win, even this series up at 1. These are two very good teams, very well-rounded teams, and the line shift is a little bit concerning to me. I don't have a good read on Denver and Utah, but yeah, I don't have a good read on Denver and Utah. I'll go Utah. I think I'm changing my mind throughout the day. I'll go Toronto and Utah. Gasol, Kemba, or Powell and Conley. Gasol and Kemba, or Powell and Conley. I'm going to go Gasol and Kemba there. Gasol did play 26 or so minutes last time out. 1 minute mark, says Tim Walford. That's right. Anything else here? If you guys got anything, we're ticking down. Let's see. Tatum or Van Vliet in single gamer for MVP? Tatum. Definitely Tatum. Definitely Tatum. Although I see what, they're both going to be, I would assume, getting a decent amount of ownership. OG or Grant? Answered that. Kemba or Jaylen Brown? Kemba. OG, Millsap, or O'Neal? Well, Millsap's minutes are concerning. I'd go Anunoby there. Him and O'Neal are both not guys that are going to produce a ton of fantasy points, but you might get a slightly faster pace with OG, and he's a slightly better player. Adam, that'll do it. We're at the 5:30 mark. Hey guys, can we get to 400 before we get out of here? 1,200 people liking it. 400 likes would equal one third of the people currently watching this show. My math says that's not that tough to do. Appreciate you guys as always for hanging out. Hey, we'll see you back here soon. Hit us up on Twitter in the meantime and stick around tonight. You've got more stuff coming up, like the MLB Live Before Lock show. They're going to take you up till 7:05 Eastern time. Tonight on the show, you've got yourself Jason Floyd, Alex Baker, 6 p.m. Make it happen, baby. Early Bird MLB coming up to close out your night as well. See you back here tomorrow on the NBA Live Before Lock show presented by No House Advantage.